Hello and welcome to the penultimate day of the Chatham House Summer School. What a week it has been so far. Thank you all for all your comments and lovely messages received last night after our session. And thank you for all your further questions about the internship program. I will do my best to get through to every single message as soon as I can. I think you know the drill by now. We'll try to get through as many questions as possible. And if you would like to ask any question in person, please raise the blue hand. Now, another day, another topic. Huawei will be completely removed from the UK's 5G networks by the end of 2027. The government has announced, I believe 2 days ago, following new advice produced by the National Cybersecurity Center on the impact of US sanctions against the telecommunications vendor. But what does that mean for the UK? What does that mean for our relationship with China? What better way to discuss these topics but today with my colleagues, which I'm delighted to introduce. So the speakers today are joining us from the International Security Program, Joyce Hackney, Senior Research Fellow and co-editor of the Journal of Cyber Policy, and Dr. Yu Tie, Senior Research Fellow on China in the Asia Pacific Program. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us today, and we are delighted to have you. Joyce, over to you.
Thank you very much, Alice. And let me start by saying what a great pleasure to be here with you today. And I'm really amazed to see such a high number of participants with us on this session. I hope that we will be able to give you all the information that you are looking for, and we look forward to answering all your questions. So please do ask us whatever you have on your mind on this topic. So as Alice said, Cherry and I will be talking to you today about 5G, about Huawei, about why this topic has been in the news for such a long time. And we thought we could do that by asking and answering 5 questions that we will have like a sort of a double act, Cherry and I, back and forth, trying to give you a little bit more information, more context about this issue and the concerns that have been raised on the topic of 5G and Huawei. So we will try and answer 5 questions. As I said, the first is, what is 5G and why does it matter? We will then talk about what is Huawei and why is the Chinese government so keen to roll out 5G domestically, but also at the international level. We will then move to talking about the allegations against Huawei. And then we will talk about what has been Huawei's response to these allegations and what will the Chinese government do in response to the UK's decision that Alice mentioned in relation to removing Huawei's kit from the network. And finally, we'll try and project into the future and talk about what might happen next. So we thought we'll start by defining or trying to give you a little bit more idea about what is 5G and why do we keep talking about it and why is it important. So 5G stands for the 5th generation, meaning the latest and once in a decade upgrade to the wireless systems that deliver data to mobile phones. An upgrade that will ultimately is promising to do 3 main things: deliver faster connection speeds, better connections, and greater capacity. So for example, if now a film that takes you 30 minutes to download using your 4G connection with 5G, you'll be able to do that in under a minute. So a much greater and faster connection speed. Another thing that's great about 5G is the capacity. So with 4G technology, it's possible to connect only a limited number of devices. So for example, around 1,000 devices per square kilometer. This is, for example, when you are attending a concert or you're at a sports venue, your 4G phone will not work. But with 5G technology, around 1 million devices per square kilometer can be connected. So basically 1 device per square kilometer. So square meter, sorry. So basically much faster connection speed and also capacity. And 5G, because of its importance, it has been referred to as the central nervous system of the 21st century economy. It promises to revolutionize the entire global economy, leading to wealth creation, and with some figures indicating that it will enable $12.3 trillion of global economic output in 2035. So in addition to the faster data speed, the wider coverage, and the better connections that I mentioned at the beginning of my remarks, 5G is the technology which will allow artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, basically that all these technologies that power, for example, driverless cars, the automated factories, and smart cities more generally to work seamlessly, right, without crashing. It will allow these driverless cars to be able to do what they are expected to do without having really massive complications. So 5G will be extremely critical to any country that is aspiring to achieve economic success and digital transformation. So I will leave it at that, and then now we'll talk about Huawei's role in 5G, and over to you, Jay.
Right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. And I'm delighted to join this session of the summer school and try to explain to you a little bit about the future. You know, the future about an emerging power, a country which perhaps all of you have to dealt with it when you attend university. I mean, just to give you a shared example, for those of you, many of you who came from the UK, and at that moment in the UK, you have about around 200,000 students study from those students from China and study in the UK universities and also sixth form colleges, like many of you who study doing A-levels. I mean, I was one of those back to 18 years ago, did my A-levels in this country and studied and worked in here. Now, if we're talking about China and Huawei, let's not having the assumption that China is a weird country and China is something described by media is always have a hidden agenda and always have a hidden purpose for something. Now, let's just start with the basic. Why does China need 5G? This is a country with 1.4 billion population. Yeah, 1.4 billion compared with the UK, which is around 800,000 million. So you could see the sheer scales in terms of the country. And why the country need to connect with each other? Why do people in China need to connect with each other? I'm pretty sure many of you who lived in China or study in China for this moment, and you all have your app, so-called WeChat. And that's pretty much one platform connecting many people all together. Now, if we do have 5G, and perhaps by using WeChat, you will be able to call your friends and call your parents in a much faster speed. If you're sitting even on high-speed railway, for example, it's almost impossible to have Wi-Fi signals in high-speed railway. But if you do have 5G technology and add it on your high-speed railway, like for example, if you take a journey from Beijing to Shanghai, and usually that would take about 4 or 5 hours. And what are you going to do with your 4 or 5 hours? I'm sure you don't want to study. Just to be frank, you don't want to study at all. You want to play games. You want to download something. You want to streaming a TV episode you'll be interested in. So these are the 5Gs and you use for entertaining purposes. Where on the other hand, the 5G in China have already also applied in terms of combating COVID-19. So just imagine how are you going to do contact tracing and how are you going to connecting who those people who have symptoms of COVID-19 and who those people do not have COVID-19. And if you do have 5G platform and if you download those apps, it will be much easier for the Chinese government to identify who those patients are and who is the potential threat somehow to the public health. So that's the way 5G has already been rightly applied inside the world's most populous country. So that's part of the reason why China would like to develop its own 5G network platform. It is really for its own domestic governance to run the country. And then obviously the Chinese Communist Party, and for those who study Chinese history in here, and you would know it is the world's largest political party, have 91 million members altogether. So how are you going to, I wouldn't say control, but how are you going to manage your members? And again, through some kind of connectivity apps on your phone. And then interestingly, the Chinese Communist Party developed a kind of 5G apps, and that is exclusively only used at 5G platform. And you cannot use on 3G, and you cannot use on 4G, and you can only use on 5G. So that's how advanced has been so far in China in terms of applying 5G. Now, when it comes to the company Huawei, and many of you would wonder, what is this company and why has there so much alarm in the West in general? Now, this company was founded in 1982 by a retired People's Liberation Army officer, Ren Zhengfei. And he was considered almost nowadays in China, almost like a national hero. You know, it's like the equivalent of Bill Gates of China. And why? Firstly, his company is selling mobile phones, and his mobile phone has an extremely good camera. And secondly, his mobile phones will be able to adapt many functions. So pretty much by having a mobile phone with you, as soon as you're out of your home, and you do not need to carry on your wallet, you do not need to carry on your ID, and you can just use the phone to resolve all the issues and problems you have. So that's only part of the functions of this company, having a mobile phone. On the other hand, this is a company also providing networks across developed countries. So countries like this country, UK, countries like in Germany, in France, and Italy, they have already used the Huawei network. So that really alarmed Western government because the Western government doesn't quite understand, and it was not very clear. It has never really been clearly said whether a Huawei company, it is a private company run by its chairman, run by himself, or Huawei is actually another branch of the Chinese Communist Party. We're not sure, because also the military background of the founder of Huawei, because he was a former PLA officer. So that really, again, raises kind of conspiracy theory. Perhaps Chairman Reng is only working for the PLA. So that's all the conspiracy theories added together. And Huawei could not really come up with a very clear explanation to the rest of the world. What is exactly a corporate governance structure? And also for the size of a company like Huawei has never really been public listed. So they have not have shares in either London Stock Exchange or New York Stock Exchange. So those kind of things, adding all the stories, adding a little bit of spice for all the story. And then finally, the United States realized the developments of this company is just simply too rapid, and look more carefully behind. What is behind? It is China's strategy of become a leading manufacturing power, a leading innovative power. So in the past, what we do know is that China is the manufacturing hub in the world. So by producing many things, including the face mask and including bicycles you're using. But China nowadays want to brand itself as an innovative power. And therefore 5G and all many other technologies we're talking about in here, electric vehicles, AI, artificial intelligence, these are the things that China want to become a leading force rather than just follow the United States. So if we're putting a bigger scale, if we're talking about great power competition, during the Cold War time, we had a nuclear race, but in the era of 21st century, the competition we have is on high technology. And therefore we're expecting to see that competition become ever intense as the years goes by, because neither China or United States would like to bog down. And both of them want to become the leading force, the number one in the field. So I end in here, and just to follow up with later questions.
Thank you, Cherry. So basically building on what you have said, the question is here that we want to answer is, what are the allegations against Huawei, and why is there like such a big, debate around their role in the 5G network? So as we said, 5G network is the future. So any country, any economy trying to get into this new generation of technology will have to have the 5G infrastructure or like the 5G basically technology in its infrastructure. So having Huawei as one of the main provider of that technology, right, has raised several concerns around the world. And if we want to look at which are the other companies that provide the technology, we have basically four. So we have Huawei, we have another Chinese company called ZTE, and Ericsson and Nokia. However, out of all these four, Huawei is leading the way and has the most advanced technology that can be deployed immediately, and also the cheapest technology. So what are the concerns against having Huawei in the kit or in the infrastructure? There are two main concerns. So the first that Cherry alluded to is basically the relationship of Huawei with the Chinese state. And a lot of countries, including the US, have argued for a long time that basically you cannot differentiate between Huawei and the Chinese government because they are the same thing. And they base their argument on several things, including the financial support from the Chinese state that Huawei has received since its initiation, and also the protectionist policies that the Chinese government have adopted in order to alienate other competition that is facing Huawei and give it this sort of edge vis-a-vis the other companies and allowing it to become what it is today. And this is not actually a secret. The founder of the company has admitted that without the Chinese policies, Huawei would not exist in the current form and shape. So there are all these sort of linkages to the Chinese states, and as Cherry said, there isn't really a clear sort of evidence to say without any doubt that Huawei has these linkages to the government. However, there are a lot of arguments that suggest that is the case. So the first area of concern is the links to the Chinese government. The second area of concern have to do with the security of the Huawei kit. So when it comes to the security of the kit, the UK government has adopted, and since the 2010, or have established, together with Huawei actually, the Huawei Cybersecurity Evaluation Center. And this center has to do one thing, and one thing only, is to look into the products of Huawei and assess whether they are secure or not. Right? So this is their job. So they make sure that when they are in the infrastructure, if there are any security concerns, that these security concerns have been raised by the center and have been, and basically the mitigating responses have been well thought of before they go and constitute a risk. Because as we know, if we have insecure kit, especially in the infrastructure, critical infrastructure, for example, in the infrastructure that supports our financial system, like the banks, that supports hospitals, that support, any other, like energy, like, the power grids, any other critical infrastructure, you have to have a very secure products in that infrastructure. Otherwise, you open the door for people who have bad intentions, or like the malicious actors, to hack into this infrastructure and to disrupt and to cause a lot of problems, which could, in some cases, especially with the advent of technology, lead to death and really very serious consequences. So the security problems are a very big concern. In last March, this center that I referred to launched a report assessing the security of Huawei, and it had two main observations. So the first observation, they said there has been no material progress to the security risks that we have raised in the past. They said, we told you that there are all these security risks, and now having assessed the products now, we have not seen any progress that has been made on the kit. That's the first thing. And the second thing, because of all of this, we can only provide limited assurance to the security of this kit. So we can say, yes, it can be deployed. However, we cannot be 100% certain that there will be no problems. So this was in March, right? And even with these findings, the UK government decided in January that it will allow Huawei in the infrastructure. However, it limited how much it was allowing it. It said we'll allow it to 30%, up to 30%. We were not gonna get it into the core. We were gonna leave it in the periphery. So basically, in case there are any problems, we are able to deal with those problems. So what changed, and why did the UK government reverse its decision? This is very much open to debate. However, the reason that the UK government has given is exactly what Alice referred to in her introductions at the beginning, is based on the sanctions that the Americans have basically put against Huawei. The sanctions say that Huawei will not be able to buy the chips, which are very essential for the company to be able to build its kit, from American companies. So by imposing these sanctions, the UK government said, well, now that you cannot go to these trusted sources, you will be trying, or you'll be getting those equipments from untrusted sources. And therefore, we can no longer give the guarantee that the kit or the 5G kit in our infrastructure is secure. So our advice is that we're going to ask companies to stop buying Huawei kit after December of this year, and we're going to ask all telecom providers to remove the 5G kit that belongs to Huawei until 2027. Why 2027? Why not now? This was done to give the telecom operators time to do this, because it is a complicated process, but importantly, because as I said at the beginning, there isn't an alternative at the moment to Huawei's technology. There are some other competitors, but their technology is not as advanced. These 7 years will allow Ericsson and Nokia and maybe another provider to come up and develop the technology that Western governments can use in their infrastructure. So basically, this is the situation when it comes to the concerns, when it comes to why the UK has went for this direction, although obviously there are all the other geopolitical considerations that Cherry referred to in her comments about this technological race between the US and China. The US historically has always been the leading country in technological development. All technology has been actually produced in Silicon Valley. The internet that was built in China was built using US technology. So the US now has found itself on the back foot, has found itself not really in the leading position that it has been used to be in for a very, very long time. So I'm gonna stop here, and I think Cherry wants to talk about Huawei's response and what would the Chinese government do to in relation to the UK's decision.
Now, just come back to the question on Huawei's response and also what the Chinese government expect to do. Interestingly, I mean, it has been really interesting week for the company. The company just published is half-year result, so 6 months revenue result, and apparently the sales of Huawei, both on telecom system and also on your mobile phone, has increased 13% compared with 6 months ago. So that does indicate to you, perhaps in the future, a market like UK or United States, Australia, you know, all these developed countries, perhaps is no longer really the space that's suitable for Huawei because of all this very this political rows between China and the West. But however, the large revenue of Huawei has been generated by developing countries, both in terms of mobile phone sales and also in terms of telecom system providing equipment and things, equipment sales as well. So that is to show you that a global company with a global outreach, if you have banned that particular company in one particular country or several particular countries, it may not necessarily harm is overall business is across the world. So that's really the side effect of globalization. We do, if we're talking about globalization to you, and Huawei, by always fault, by always unclarity regarding its relationship with the Chinese state, it is a globalized company be able to generating revenue across the world. So I don't really know what the company will respond in the future regarding UK's decision, because the government is suggesting by 2027, they would like to completely eradicate and erase Huawei. So we shall wait and see. Now, in terms of China's government retaliation and what we have heard so far, there's a lot of war on words has been crossing between the two governments, between Beijing and London. Beijing saying UK is going to bear the important consequences, and then London saying, fine, Beijing is going to bear important consequences, but nobody really know what kind of significant consequences those two countries could have. The reason why we only hear so much about diplomatic rhetoric, but very little substance, it is precisely because China and the UK are not geopolitical rivalries, because they do not share the border, and the United States has a very limited operation by the South China Sea in the Asia-Pacific region. So China's primary concern, it is the United States. China's primary concern is with neighboring countries, as you can see from the recent conflicts within India, and also China's issues with many other countries share the border with the South China Sea. So UK does not necessarily pose a geopolitical rivalry towards China. So if we're talking about sanction, there's a very little China can do. Now, the only two possibilities I can think of in here is, firstly, as many of you perhaps may go into the financial sector later in your career, UK has make sure absolutely that they would prefer to let the British banks and also investment banks in the City of London benefiting from China's vast domestic market. So one way the Chinese government could put in sanction, it is to stop, I wouldn't say stop, but try to reduce the transaction businesses from the UK investment banks towards China. So that's one sanction perhaps China can do. And secondly, this perhaps relate to the UK higher education sector. Perhaps the Chinese government could issue an announcement by discouraging the Chinese middle class by sending their children to study in the UK. And this obviously would seriously impact on the revenues of the British universities. And given we are in the post-COVID-19 world, and of course, every single higher education institution need money, need funding, and this will come with a very heavy blow towards the British higher education sector. So I think these are the two things potentially the Chinese government can do. But realistically, if we're going to expecting escalated physical military conflicts between two countries, I think that's very unlikely. So Joyce, I think we're now in the phase of we're talking about what's the next, how 5G, who are the potential competitors? I mean, who are the potential alternatives, for example, if no Huawei, but what would be the answer? Ericsson or Samsung? Samsung was talking about 6G today.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a very good question, and that's what we should be looking at in the future, because what's happening with 5G is to a large extent, as you say in French, effet accompli. So when it comes to technology, and because the way in which it moves, which is really fast, and it develops really fast, we have to keep looking at the future, at the next generation of technology, rather than staying within the current debate. But I just wanted to mention a few points before we talk about what will happen next, and put the 5G debate into the bigger picture of this technological race between the big powers. So first of all, it's important to understand that the UK's decision on Huawei now is not just based on security. As I mentioned in my previous comments, there are other considerations. There is the issue around coronavirus and the role of China in this. There is obviously all the issues around what's happening on Hong Kong, the human rights considerations, and importantly, the very big sort of resistance from the Conservative Party, the party that is now in government, against China, against Huawei, asking the Prime Minister to take a much harder line on China. So we have to understand that this decision, the context that this decision comes in, and understand the bigger picture and the implications. And while the UK and China are not rivals, as Sherry mentioned, and on the contrary, UK has a lot of interest to keep a good relationship with China, especially now in the uncertainty of Brexit, with the economic recession, with all of these really difficult challenges. It has an interest to keep good relationships with China, but also, there's its relationship with the US. So it's really very much a very tricky situation for the UK. As we say, it's between a rock and a hard place. However, the importance of the UK's decision, or the significance of it, is also partly related to what other countries will do now that the UK has decided to go, via that path. Will that encourage other states to ban Huawei the way, the same way the UK did? The assumption is probably yes. So what the UK will end up deciding is will not just impact Huawei in the UK, but will also impact Huawei in other countries, in other European and Western countries. Now, when you have all this sort of tension between two big technological giants, and each one is trying to push the other, and you want, the US is basically cornering its allies and saying do not use Huawei, etc., and trying to push for other alternatives, and China aggressively trying to deploy its technology around the world. And as Sherry said, it's no longer just the Western governments that matter. China has, as part of its Belt and Road Initiative, has like several agreements with many Asian and African countries, and it has already deployed the technology there. So it has already like a big solid basis of countries that is using the Chinese technology. So when you have this race between two massive powers, the fear and the concern is of the impact that this will have on the internet. And the term that we often hear about, referring to referring to the situation is splinternet, which basically means splitting the internet. And the reason why the internet has been so resilient and so strong over the years is because the way in which it has been designed. It is a network of networks. It does not have one single point of failure, and it's basically able to adapt to any difficulty, any attack, etc., and able to maintain the functionality. And therefore, we've seen, like now with the COVID situation, the internet usage have increased by at least 30%. And because their network is resilient, it has been able to support this increase in use. However, this continuous push and this continuous race between these two big powers will potentially lead to having different versions of the internet. If the US will keep alienating China and cutting off the supply chain and saying you cannot rely on our technology, what will happen is China will and is actually producing and developing its own technology. So it will become very, in the near future, very much self-reliant. So it won't really need any other sources to be able to achieve its vision. That means that it will develop a system in which will be different than what we actually have. So instead of having one network of networks, you'll have different versions of networks, which means that this will raise the cybersecurity problems. When you have different networks, there will be increased risks, which will increase the threats and will have also economic repercussions. So it's really in no one's interest to split the internet, to split the technology the way it is going now. And that is basically the biggest concern of not having a vision where in which what we have now remains. And actually China has been, and this is a very long or let's say complex topic that unfortunately we don't have time to get into, is basically now proposing a way to restructure the internet with a new technical standard called the new IP. And if this happens, that would really cause a lot of concerns on like breaking the internet, as I was just saying. So it's not all good news. There are really very big concerns, and governments should be aware whenever they make decisions like this of the implications of those decisions on the future of the internet, on the future of economies, and on the future of livelihood. And I will stop here. Alice, I don't know whether we should maybe start taking some questions. I see that we have 52 questions.
I think we may as well, unless Cherry would like some closing notes to share.
No, let's go to the question. I found the question really fascinating, and even I was a little bit shocked.
Okay, let's jump straight into, and maybe Aidan, let's start with you, Aidan. You're ready to ask your question. So to kick off the discussion, could we hear from you first? Hi and welcome.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, with relation to obviously the kind of word play in politics between China and a lot of Western nations, would you say that China would be far more aggressive in other policies such as Hong Kong, especially Hong Kong, because that's quite an essential part of the Greater Bay Area for the kind of innovation that they want to set up? So would you say that the Chinese government will try to be more aggressive in its actions as a result of this?
Alice, do you want to maybe take like maybe 3 questions at a time? We can try to answer them so we can answer as many
Yes,
as
maybe also we have a couple of questions for Cherry on the UK and China relations, and also about, you know, whether you are surprised that the Chinese government is responding like that, in particular when they have banned, you know, companies like Amazon and Google, and also what is the likelihood that this would change the way China approaches maybe its governance in the future?
Okay, very good question, and I found almost quite illuminating by reading those Q&A. I'm just rather shocked to see the attitudes towards the Chinese government, just reading by the chat room, is extremely negative. I mean, because I'm constantly also teaching university students and also high school students in China as well, and their views towards the Chinese government and also towards the Western government was rather positive one. So I wonder, where's the knowledge gap in here? Where's the perception in here? Why this would happen? So that's my little bit surprise in here today. Now, if we're regarding whether China will become more and more aggressive or China will become, you know, either way, become softer or something, I think let's start with the basic. Look, when China decided to open up its market back to 1979, China has never decided one day it will become a multi-party democracy. So the market opening, the 1979 economic reform, it is all about economic globalization. Get China integrate itself into global economy, but they have never decided want to become a multi-party democracy and free election. So that's perhaps the conceptual difference between China and the West. Because for so many years, perhaps in the last 40 years or so, the Western countries, and including United States, United Kingdom, France, you know, whereas G7 countries was hoping that it could shape China's behavior. But ultimately, it did not manage to shape China's behavior. China has decided to charter its own way instead of embracing the political values that has been enshrined in this part of the world. So that perhaps really disappoint many Western governments, and that's perhaps the widened gap between China and the West. That's number one. Now, number two is because China has arrived in a situation that being the world's second largest economy, and therefore the dilemma is you have the business world in the West on the one hand, and talking about China perhaps is still remain as the largest market that Western companies would like to engage with, whereas on the other hand, they're facing an increasingly difficult and more assertive government politically. So the business world in the West found it's very difficult to navigate through that difficulties between economics and politics. Now, on the other hand, you have all these Western politicians and has somehow demonizing China, both its own population and also the government and the party, and felt this is not a normal country and everyone is living under oppression. But unfortunately, that is just not the case inside China. And if you're actually reading YouGov polls, or you read many Ipsos Morris polls, all these opinion polls, it seems to be the ordinary Chinese population trusts the Chinese government. Why? Tell you a very simple reason. At least the first wave of COVID-19, China managed to curb it and managed to settle. So that is actually a confidence boost for the Chinese government to some extent. So what I'm to go further, and judging by all the signals being offered from Beijing, that China began to care so much less about how the Western countries and how the Western societies think about China. And what they're actually more interested in, it is how to revitalize its own economy. So they're running that sense of so-called self-reliant policy. So self-reliant in terms of economically, but also that sense of self-reliance when it comes to technology developments. I mean, Joyce and I was talking about the sense of self-sufficiency, and that's precisely by having its own 5G network, by having its own internet, and that is a pathway to self-sufficiency as well. So even if, I mean, no matter how hard the British politicians might try in terms of name and shame China, I'm afraid it really will do very little in terms of shaping the behavior of the Chinese government. And lastly, many of the Chinese populations have that very strong nationalistic sentiment. So the harder that West has pushed towards China and cornered China, and actually it will help the regime to unite the country, not to divide the country.
Could I just make a tiny little follow-up question? Do you think that the kind of rise of China, as Merkel said in an interview, has kind of made people question the so-called superiority we deem as liberal democracies, as people say liberal democracies are? So has the rise of China made kind of that more of a questionable fact?
Adian, I got your question. I think that has been a kind of line of thinking has already been reflected within the Chinese state in itself. So one very simple example I can give, perhaps you may have Chinese classmates, and in March this year, in the UK, there has been an influx of Chinese students flying back to China. They decided not want to stay in the UK anymore. Why? Because the British government has not really managed to control COVID-19. Just as simple as that. I mean, just to show you, in terms of governance, that ordinary Chinese people perhaps do have a trust towards the government. So it's a very different construct, because also the Chinese population, when they are very little, they've been told to abide authority, not to asking questions. So that maybe, again, is the education have somehow molded the population, have certain attitudes towards the government.
Thank you. We have a lot of questions on cyber technology and technological progress for Joyce as well. Perhaps, Joyce, some people are asking Jemima and William, you know, does it mean that if because Huawei is a Chinese company, would then the Chinese government have access to the data and the network collects, basically? Mm-hmm. And what are the other countries outside of sort of China's sphere? Are they supportive of these sort of 5G initiatives? And, you know, how does that all work? And also in terms of grouping those features like your wallet and phone, is that not a concern that this would then increase the vulnerability of your information, because it would be so easily perhaps as one entity to sort of access? Mm-hmm. And perhaps to share an interesting comment from Daniel also is like, wouldn't it make more sense to push innovation within the UK now, mm-hmm. rather than to, you know, rely so much on either China or America to apply?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much, Alissa. These are all very, very good questions. On the access to data and whether actually the Chinese government will be able to do that if Huawei is in the infrastructure. The Huawei Cybersecurity Evaluation Center that I referred to, which is basically, as I said, a joint partnership or a joint initiative between the National Cybersecurity Center here in the UK, the main body looking into cybersecurity issues, and also Huawei, has not found any evidence of the relationship between China and Huawei, and have not found any evidence to suggest that they actually have access to this data. However, in these, with technology, and this also answers the question of if with the increase of data usage, what are the risks? As technology is developing, it's creating a lot of new opportunities. But with every new thing, there will always be risks and threats that we haven't thought about. So as technology develops and gives us all these great things, there will be new threats, there will be new areas of risk. And when we talk about cybersecurity, we have to think that cybersecurity actually is not a destination. It is a journey. So that means that cybersecurity practices and measures have to be thought of on a regular basis. They have to be assessed continuously and tested, right? Because we might think that we are on top of things, and then we will discover that actually there is this, we call it zero vulnerability, or there's this backdoor, or there's this vulnerability that we did not know about. And as some of you might have, heard of, or followed the news yesterday with the Twitter attack that basically was conducted through one of the very basic types of cyber attacks, through social engineering. So they were able to trick basically a Twitter employee who has access to, or administrator access privileges, and they were able to get into the accounts of Obama, of Bill Gates, of Joe Biden, etc. So it's really very important to think of cybersecurity as a long-term journey where it has to be regularly updated and regularly tested. And on whether this will actually push innovation within the UK, this is ultimately the thinking. However, in a way, on the 5G debate, it's probably now too late to be competing with Huawei. The thinking has to be for the future. How can the UK and like-minded states compete when it comes to 6G? How can they compete in other areas of technology? Because this technological landscape is not just about 5G. There is the artificial intelligence, there is Internet of Things, there is quantum computing. There are all these areas of crucial and very important technology that will support the infrastructure of tomorrow, that will support the way we interact with each other, the way businesses interact with each other, the way the world interacts with each other. So it's very important that, and this is actually part of, or a key argument that we are having in a piece that I'm writing together with Cherry, about the importance of having a vision for technological governance, and not just thinking by stopping Huawei on 5G, we have won the battle and now we're back into this front seat. No, this requires investment, long-term vision, and the ability to see the big picture.
Thank you, Joyce. Let's go now to another blue hand. Utkarsh, would you like to ask your question next, please?
Hi. So my question is sort of, I guess Cherry mentioned that China doesn't care about it's sort of how the West looks at it, but I feel like, Huawei, it should be viewed as a private company, not as someone attached to the Chinese state. So how could Huawei as a company improve its reputation on the world stage? Because I feel like, as a student of global politics, Huawei's, if it improves its reputation, it can also improve the Chinese state's reputation in the world stage as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shall I take that one? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sure. Thank you for your question. Interestingly, many of you in here would believe that Chinese government is desperately trying to save Huawei. But actually, on the other hand, the Chinese government is also very annoyed. I tell you why. Because China is a state-led economy, telecom sector are strictly controlled by the state-owned enterprises. Those state-owned enterprises are majority shareholding by the Chinese government and Chinese Communist Party, be able to appoint CEOs and chairmen. But how come suddenly a private company popping up and the Chinese authority could not really do anything about it? So actually, at the end of the day, I think the Chinese government was actually as annoyed as many other Western governments towards Huawei, because simply they don't know. The Communist Party have a habit of taking control on everything, but simply found out a 5G network platform cannot be completely controlled by the man in the hands of in Beijing. And that is something rather alarming. So just try to offer different views in here. And Huawei itself can stand itself without the Chinese government. But just the problem is because of its founder has the linkage with the People's Liberation Army, and therefore this whole various conspiracy theory just been associated with it. And one day, until now, we still don't have any clear evidence to show what kind of relationship this company has with the Chinese state. But one thing I can assure you is that the Chinese government is also very annoyed because they cannot totally control Huawei, because the telecom sector in China is strictly state-led, but you have this private company come up and they don't know what to do.
Can I add to that, Alice, maybe?
Yes.
So in addition to, I think that's a very, very good question. And one, I think that also Huawei is, investing a lot in, and, trying to have PR and issue statement and engage with government, etc. So they understand of the reputational damage that is there. However, when it comes to technology, really what decides where the company is and how it's seen is is largely also based on what sort of technology it has, what sort of research and development it has, what sort of advancement it has. And as we said, Huawei is now leading the way in this area. So the other countries look at Huawei, although they, forget about the Chinese linkages. It is a company that has that is a very big success story. So in order to basically deal with Huawei, they have to be able to compete. They have to be able to come up and develop the same sort of technology. So it's not really in the technology world, it's not really about naming and shaming. It's rather who can compete, who has the technology, who is able to go and make things happen. And this is how we should think about these things. I think that's a very important point to be made.
And perhaps if you can also, Joyce, answer a few more questions on sort of technology side from Marco and perhaps Jacob and Vincentia, if I can sort of group them together. Perhaps, a little bit more also about the 6G you mentioned earlier. I mean, is that true? What does that mean? Should all countries try to have their own 5G provider? What about who started all those sort of conspiracy theories about 5G and, about, mind control and, things like that, how, and also the potential split of the internet, could that lead to a greater conflict maybe arising between the new powers?
Yeah, all excellent questions. On the 6G, is it true? Yes. I mean, this is how technology develops. So 5G is not, before 5G, we had 4G, and then we had 3G, 2G, 1G. And every G, which basically every generation, has brought with it an advancement in technology. And it really started with 3G, with the smartphones, where we started to see a very big shift from what we were used to. And 5G will be able to, as I said at the beginning, do all these great things in such a great speed and such great capacity. 6G will be able to do more than that. What exactly it will do, it will have to be seen, because, as I said, technology is constantly developing, and we do understand some aspects of what it might look like, but we don't know the full picture. Even in 5G, although 5G has been deployed in the infrastructure, the full potential of 5G will not be seen now. It will be seen in the next 5 to 10 years. So we have to keep in mind that this is not something that happens just like that. This is a process that has been rolled out, and we start seeing things progressing sort of slowly. Should all countries try to have their own 5G? Very, very good question. But in order to get to that point of technological advancement, behind that, there has to be so much investment in it, and so much research and development to get to that level. Does it make sense, for example, that every European country has that? Probably not. It's better to have, one provider, or maybe a group of countries collaborating together, or group of private companies collaborating together to create that capacity. Huawei has half of its employees dedicated to research and development, which is a massive capacity that no other company has. So this is very important to know, that this is not something that also, it's a decision, and yes, we will develop the 5G and therefore it happens. And given that countries are now in the aftermath of COVID, there will be a lot of economical consideration and other priorities that they will have in mind. So whether they will prioritize this particular area, it will be seen. However, Boris Johnson has led a meeting a few months ago with a number of states, trying to come up with an alternative to Huawei. How can different countries like-minded come together and create this very much needed alternative? Who started the conspiracy? It's really very difficult to know. One of the main problems of the internet, I mean, we love the internet, it connected all of us together, but has also generated a massive problem of disinformation and fake news. And this is a very, very old problem that precedes the date of the internet. It used to be done through newspapers, etc. Used to take, years for one story to tour the world. And now, in a matter of minutes, like one story can break the internet and can actually start be repeated on so many, or so repeated by so many people, which that we won't have really like a solid basis. And on this, there's a lot of conspiracy theories about 5G and the impact on health, etc., which really do not necessarily have any base. Will the splitting of the internet cause greater conflict? I think yes, it won't. It's actually, so it will create economical challenges, it will create security challenges, and it will open the door for more, or let's say, it will give more options to conduct malicious activities against each other, right? So if you split the internet, if you break it into sections, it will be much easier, to connect and disconnect. So this of the global network, but to also be easier to find gaps and to find backdoors and to find loopholes that will enable malicious actors to conduct activities. So yes, that will make the attacks proliferate, which is, as things stand, are already a very big challenge in cyberspace.
Thank you very much, Joyce. I believe we have just about time for one more question. Let's see who is next. Caleb. Caleb, can you please unmute and ask your question?
Thank you. So I just wanted to ask, because it seems that the only reason that UK did a U-turn was because the US put sanctions on those chips. But does it seem unfair that China's almost targeting the UK when the reason why we had to make the decision was because of the US? And also lots of other European countries have blocked Huawei, so it seems a bit unfair that China's targeting the UK specifically. So what would you say about that?
Shall I take that one?
Yes, Jerry. Please.
Yeah, okay. I think there's three reasons why UK made a U-turn. And I think firstly, for obvious reason, Club has stated, is because of down the pressure, intensive lobbying from Washington, D.C., and that's reason number one. And UK obviously want to show that special relationship historically been built with its allies, and therefore decided what Michael Pompeo called join the club of clean countries, as what he said yesterday. Now, I think the second reason is down to the British domestic politics. And for those of you who study A-level British history, modern history after 1945, you may have aware that every single British Tory party prime minister came out of power because of foreign affairs issues, and mostly related to European foreign policy. Because this country now is in the phase of Brexit phase, and therefore that seems to be the European question being answered. And now the second question is now come to the chance of China question. And therefore you see a large number of Tory backbenchers and push this very hard towards Boris Johnson and ask him to make a U-turn. So that's part of the domestic reason. And also yesterday, again, I've seen the opinion poll made by YouGov, apparently 70% of the Tory voters and who have voted for Conservative Party in the last general election are extremely supportive to government's view towards U-turn towards Huawei. So I think Boris Johnson is really very much bogged down by the domestic pressure. So I will say foreign affairs is an extension of domestic politics. And what's happened with Huawei and with China has been precisely show that is the reason for that. And the last reason is that perhaps UK really want to develop its own 5G network, want to develop its own technology. One thing which I've not mentioned in here is many Chinese students in your age, when they attend university, they have decided to study science and physics or chemistry. And many of them choose not to study things like history or politics or geography because they felt somehow studying science could offer them a brighter future. So that's the view of the Chinese parents and also many Chinese children. So to some extent, and you see that talent pool of engineers, of data scientists being built in China compared with the UK. So perhaps maybe UK want to cultivating its own talents in terms of 5G and in terms of many other leading technology sectors as well.
Thank you, Jerry. Maybe just one final minute from Joyce as well. You mentioned where do you think this debate will go next, but in your view, I don't know, can we finish on a positive, on a high, with some good message?
I think that's a good way to end this rather gloomy session. I think a positive thing that has come out of this is that the realization of several governments, like especially developed governments, of the importance of investing in technology and the importance of not really just standing back and relying on what's out there, the importance of building the capacities at the national level. And I think that will encourage, hopefully, more cooperation to create or to support STEM education and to create this very much needed, cooperation or partnership with the private sector. Hopefully that will also generate some investment in, new ideas. Maybe people on this call, when they go into universities, they will have new ideas that will get actually the support that is needed from governments, and that will enable a much bigger, technological capacity within these countries. I think this debate is not going anywhere, and I think it's very important that we are aware of the issues and we're talking about them. It's much better to do it that way than, deal with the aftermath of a certain situation.
Cherry?
I think what I've gathered today is perhaps see China with your own eyes rather than just reading the media being reported in the West. And perhaps you realize China perhaps is also a normal country and share the same concern as many other countries. Ordinary people just share the same concern and different life dilemmas as well. So we're not really special creature in this planet.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Joyce. Thank you, Cherry, for spending your afternoon with us. It has been a very informative session, a lot to think about. And as you say, let's see what happens next. For the time being, enjoy your afternoons and thank you again for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Love to see you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for doing that. And I see already we have a lot of questions as well for tomorrow. I know that my colleagues are eagerly waiting for their session. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce my team members from the HR team, who we share the office together, and we haven't been in the office together for, oh my goodness, more than 4 months now, and I really miss them, but very kindly, they are joining us today. It's a follow-up session from yesterday's one when we talked about work experience and how to stand out and, the competition for all these sort of internships and jobs. So I believe Stuart is going first. He has also prepared a PowerPoint presentation. Stuart, thank you so much for joining us today, and good luck with your presentation.
Thanks very much, Alice. Right, hopefully this works. Go about sharing my screen. Hopefully everyone can see this.
Yes,
and I just wonder if we could just run my poll now while I just do a quick brief introduction.
Sure.
If that's okay. So hi everyone, I'm Stuart. I am, as you can see there, one of the HR assistants at Chatham House. An interesting position for me personally because I actually started my role at Chatham House within, 2 days or 3 days before lockdown started. So I've been learning the ropes as I go, very much, working from home, which has been an experience. It's definitely increased our communication as a team. And there we go, my poll is now up on the screen. And I just wanted to get an idea from you guys watching, just really, what kind of stuff do you think I studied? Some of you may have done your research and looked me up on LinkedIn before the session. I don't know. That would give it away. But it would be interesting just to see, what people think I might have studied to now take up a career in HR and what I might have done previously. So the majority of people think I studied English at university. That's wrong. I am actually a zoology graduate, so I've got a degree in zoology, animal science, so nothing really HR related. And wow, 41% said recruitment consultant. That is sort of correct. I have done that in the past, but actually my most recent career was as a police officer in London's Metropolitan Police. So my session is all about trying to stand out from the crowd. And hopefully I can carry on. There we go. Right. So writing a personal statement. Now, when you go to university in the UK, you have to write a personal statement. I don't know what it's like in other countries. You may well do the same. But also, it's not necessarily just about going to university. This also applies when you apply for your job. And I know that my colleague Alice will also touch on this when she gets her chance to speak after me, about cover letter. This is really, the basis of learning how to sell yourself to a degree in terms of how to stand out from the crowd. So when you're writing your personal statement, you really want to try and have a little bit of structure to your writing. So, the introduction, the beginning is all about who are you? Why is the person reading your statement going to want to continue reading your statement? Why do they think, oh, this is a really good opening sentence? This is a really good understanding of what they're applying for. So, you really want to focus on the subject matter or the course matter, whatever it might be. You can have a killer opening line if you can find one, and try not to be too generic. Try not to follow, the thought process that goes on online. Be yourself, stand out from the crowd. You then move on to the main section, which is where, you really get into the bulk of who you are, what you're all about, and, what you can bring to the organisation. You can talk about your schoolwork, your college work, if it's a particular project you're interested in. Don't just say, oh, I did maths. Talk about it. What did you really enjoy about maths? What do you want to increase about your maths knowledge? Whatever it might be. You need to talk about your outside of school activities, whether that is reading books or articles that aren't necessarily to do with your school reading lists, what you're watching on TV, what you're listening to on the radio or podcasts, whether you're going to events, work experience, visiting museums. It's all relevant so long as it is to do with you and what your passion is about. And then, of course, there are extracurricular activities. You're here today, so you attended the Chatham House Summer School. That's a good one. But other than that, do you like sport? Are you a musician? How can you show different characteristics of yourself? And then you want to wrap it up. You want to be concise. You want to make sure that this section really has an impact and leaves the person reading it with a sense of, I want to talk to you. I want to understand more about you. I want to know more about you. And just briefly, very briefly, restate why you're applying. Go back to your introduction. Don't reuse the same words, but just change it around a little bit and just start again. So then this is all about putting your passion on paper and trying to tell a story as to about why you love something. I came out of school and I wanted to study zoology because I'm obsessed with the animal world. Everything about them fascinates me. I'm not necessarily the biggest environmentalist because that's a bit sciencey. I just love animals and animal behavior. That's what I wanted to do. And that's what I spoke about. But I spoke about other things about me that made it stand out a little bit. And just gave, the people reading it an understanding as to who I'm about. So team sports, I'm a big sporting fan. I get involved wherever I can. It gives me a competitive edge. It allows me to think very quickly on my feet. And it also shows I'm capable of teamwork and working as a team. I'm also very into my music. I did play, I don't anymore. But I'm also constantly listening to the radio. It really, I think it shows when you get to a certain stage in any instrument that you have a dedication, you practice, you put your time in, but also you have that creative edge. You might not be the best jazz musician in the world and you can improvise a solo for 18 bars off the top of your head, but it shows that you understand a little bit about the creative process. And also charity work was another big area that I was involved with. And that shows that you're proactive, you go out and you do something to try and influence change for the good, but also you're giving. If a colleague or, a classmate comes up to you and says, can I borrow you for 5 minutes? I really need a hand. You're going to be the sort of person that goes, yes, absolutely, rather than, no, I'm too busy. But you also want to try and match this to what the job description or is relevant to the course, what it says. So team sports, that can be to do with sports science, very obvious. It can be to do with anything. If you're a lawyer, you're going to work with another team of lawyers. If you're a scientist, you're going to work with a team of scientists. You need to try and translate what your passion is and what your interests is, or are, I should say, into the same language and terms that are on, the course description or on the job description, whatever it might be. So you have to think constantly when you're writing yours is how are you going to stand out and how many other statements the person reading yours is going to be reading. They could be reading 800, 900, 2,000, 10,000 or 5. Who knows? So you need to really, no matter how big that number is or small, you need to try and stand out as much as possible. There's no point in lying. There's no point in exaggerating and saying something that you can't back up. You have to be open and honest, because as soon as you are in an interview scenario and it's found out that you haven't been truly honest, things can go wrong and it's just not worth the trouble. It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of their time. Be honest all the time, but show off. If you've got something that you can show off, do it. It's a chance for you to show off. No one's asking you, you know, to be that model that stands at the end of the catwalk and doesn't move. Move, show yourself off, show what you can do, you know. If you've got something, show it off. That's the other point. You have to be passionate about it. You can't, you know, if you're sat there typing, I like music because it is nice, it's not going to be fun to read for the person reading it. If you're talking about music makes me get up in the morning, it makes me feel alive, I love to listen to it while I exercise or while I, you know, do my work, fantastic. That is so much more interesting. And you have to show off your knowledge about what you're applying for. You can't just be applying for courses on the back of a whim or on a hope. You need to show off what you know about that course. You need to build the interest and intrigue in you. You need to give them that little taste, you know, that really shows, oh, I want to talk to you. I think I want to work with you. I think I want to bring you onto my course so you can, you know, come to our university and make a difference. There are always easy things you can do throughout an application, throughout a personal statement, whatever it might be. Go for them. They're low-hanging fruit. Pick them, grab them. They are the easy wins, the easy points. But you need to do something extra as well as that. You need to create structure, as I mentioned earlier, to create flow. As you can see on the left diagram, it's nice and simple. You go from one to the next. On the right diagram, you've made this point, you now go to this point, and you come back to this point. It doesn't make sense. It's difficult to read. The person reading it will most likely, after maybe 5 to 10 seconds, think, no, I'm not interested anymore, and they're done. That's how quickly some people can make a decision, and you need to really ramp up what you're doing and show off as much as you can. So the next slide is an example from my own personal application to Chatham House. Obviously, as I've already said, I don't really have the most relevant experience in the field on paper, but when you know, I put what I wanted to on paper and I typed it into the application process, it really stood out. You know, when I speak to my manager now, she says this application really stood out. I think it was Christmas Eve even that she sent me an email. She wasn't working, but she was reading the application and said, I need to speak to you when, you know, the Christmas New Year break is over because this is very good. And, you know, that was pleasing to me because you spend time on these things, you put effort into your application. So the question was, tell us why you want to join our HR team. And, you know, I wrote the answer in 2 sections. First of all, why Chatham House? And second of all, why HR? So Chatham House, obviously, international affairs, global affairs, it's what's going on in the world, finger on the pulse all the time. That interests me, that excites me. So I wrote about how technology and the instant nature of news, as we've just spoken about, can rapidly change the world in a few minutes, and it can create ripples globally. So I wanted to be part of that, but I don't necessarily have the research skills, but I can be part of it from the other hand, which is when I moved into the HR side of things. It's very, you know, it's something I'm very passionate about, and it's my belief that it can have an impact on an organization that cannot be overlooked. If I can be of assistance to my research colleagues who are changing the world, I am in some way, in my own way, contributing. I'm making their lives easier. I'm making the paperwork on their desk sometimes less, mostly more, but that's a separate matter. It's all about taking on the challenge of what I wanted to be involved with and showing off my passions. So the key takeaways from what I've been speaking about, and I know this has been a whistle-stop tour, but that's the way it is. You need to be personal. You need to really get personal about yourself, really think about who you are as a person, and really try and understand how to put that on paper. Honesty is always the best policy, not just in personal statements, in life in general. Keep it simple. Don't overthink things. If you want to write about how much you love, I don't know, cricket, rugby, Marilyn Manson, whatever, do it. But keep it simple. You know, don't overthink what you're trying to do. Don't over-explain either. You need to keep that sense of intrigue. You need to make sure you include all of the related experience you have. If the course is about law, try and include experiences that you've had around law. If you haven't, include what experience you have and try and convert it and show how it translates to being relevant. Don't curb your enthusiasm. Gosh, that's a bad typo from me. Your enthusiasm is what makes you who you are. You need to show off. You need to really show that you want this. You're not sending the application because someone's telling you to or forcing you to. Show that you want it. And then, you know, if it's a course and it's a particular area, why? Why do you want to study this course? I wanted to study zoology because it was an interest. It wasn't necessarily a career, and I made that very obvious. I wasn't necessarily interested in pursuing a career in this. I was so interested, I wanted to spend 3 years immersed in it. And that was honesty, and that was what I wanted to do. So if you can take one thing away, it's follow your passions, do what you want to do. And, you know, when it comes to jobs, as my career shows, you don't necessarily stick to the exact same function or area always. You can move across, you can, you know, you have transferable skills. But there we go. Good luck, and you've got this.
Thank you very much, Stuart. That was very positive, very upbeat. I like the energy. Thank you. I believe we go to Alice next.
Yes,
Alice,
so moving to me next.
over to
Hi
you.
everyone. Great to be talking to you all. I hope you're enjoying summer school so far. So leading on from Stuart's presentation on personal statements and leading off Rebecca's session yesterday on personal brand, I'm now going to move on to cover letters. So I'll just open my screen for you all. Okay, here we go. Okay, I did a picture of Lionel Richie with a pun, and then I started to wonder if anyone actually knew who Lionel Richie was, because obviously I'm talking to a different age group, but potentially you will. If not, it's fine. But yes, so I'm going to talk to you about cover letters. So a cover letter, I'm not sure how many of you would have prepared one in the past, but it's otherwise known as a motivation letter, which will assist your CV as part of a job application. And what I want to talk to you all about today is that how a cover letter can be such an important bridge between your application and an employer, and how by making it personal and really bringing out your personal brand, you can make it really count. So first of all, during a recruitment process, you have to remember that recruiters and hiring managers could potentially be looking at hundreds of applications, but the best applications will always include a cover letter. So if you are asked to optionally upload a cover letter as part of your application, please always do it, because it really does make a difference. And the reason why is because the cover letter gives you an opportunity to reflect on your own unique capabilities and really explain why you're the suitable candidate for the role. So think yesterday back to Rebecca's presentation on personal brand. What makes you you? What are your unique experiences and skills? So what you want to be able to do in your cover letter is really sell that to a prospective employer as part of, and really just be selling your application. So a cover letter, try not to think about it as just another formality as part of your application. If you think about it, the job application process is basically about building relationships between you and an employer, and trying to explain why you're the best organisational fit. So your cover letter is your first opportunity to be able to build a rapport with a hiring manager. And it also gives you a chance to use a less formal style than you would with a CV. And again, that can relate back to your personal brand and being personable. It really gives you a chance to showcase who you are as a person. You can even do things like, when you're explaining your skills and your accomplishments, talk about how those bring meaning to you, because that's going to be something else that's really going to attract an employer. So I've spoken about how a cover letter can really humanise you, but it can also be revealing in so many other aspects. So it can reveal skills such as how you communicate, how detail orientated you are, how much you understood the job description. So when you are writing a cover letter, remember to nail the basics to make your best first impression. So just simple things like spelling and grammar, whilst also being able to give a glimpse into who you are as a person. So I'm aware that the audience who I'm talking to is, you know, you're all quite young and at the beginning of your journey in life. So I just wanted to think about some transferable skills, which I'm sure all of you are demonstrating in some capacity, instead of just focusing on technical hard skills, you know. So things that I'm sure you're all already doing are saying things like emotional intelligence, communication, problem solving, teamwork, time management and organisation. I think it can be difficult when you're just starting off to feel a lot of pressure, because you obviously are not going to have a huge amount of experience in everything, but just remember that's absolutely fine. You already have things that you can draw on. So I'm not sure if it's clear through the pictures, but what I've tried to do is just relate some of those transferable skills that I've just spoken about back to things that you might already be doing in your day-to-day life. So things like Stuart has already mentioned, if you're playing a sport, especially if you're a team captain of a sport team, then you're displaying leadership. You know, when you're playing sports in a team, you're collaborating with loads of different people, you're showing your communication skills, problem solving. You might play an instrument, and if you play an instrument, you're using a whole different part of your mind to be able to do that. So that's already showing that you have responsibilities, problem solving skills, self-motivation. Some of you might even have weekend jobs or some other part-time form of employment. Just so, for example, if you work in a shop, that's a really great thing to be doing, because again, if you're speaking to customers, you might be displaying conflict management skills, definitely communication skills, and you're showing that you already have a responsibility. So just think of your skills more broadly and not just what your technical skills are when you're writing your cover letter. So just some top tips when you finally get to writing and how to get things started. So first of all, do your research. I would recommend always going on a company's social media, on their website. Just see what they're about, see what their values are, see how those align to your values, because that's going to be what motivates you to want to apply to work there, and that's what you want to come through in your cover letter. Always follow the job application instructions carefully. Like, I've done it before in the past where you kind of are just whizzing through applying for lots of different jobs. But yes, always read the instructions carefully to make sure that you're uploading the right things, that you're getting the right gist of what this role is and who that company is. Always choose your examples carefully. So when you're drawing on your skills and your experience and your competencies, make sure that you've read the job description and you've managed to define what exactly they're looking for. And then you can make sure that you're using your examples to match up to that and you're just staying relevant. And I've written there buzzwords, but what I mean is when you're reading through a job description, you'll notice that they'll use specific words to describe what skills they're looking for. And to make sure that you're keeping it super relevant, I would just make sure that you litter those throughout your cover letter, so you're staying extra relevant, as I said. Next up, nail your structure. I know it can be difficult if you have a lot to say. You might want to go on for pages and pages, but I say 1 page is always the maximum. Try just keep it as succinct as you can, and like I said, keep it relevant. Killer opening lines. Like, I know Stuart's touched on this, but it can be so easy to just look at generic template online and use a generic opening line, like, I would like to apply for this job because. If you can, try to think of something a bit more meaningful and a bit more thoughtful. So you could even say something such as, I'm excited to be considered for this position because, or I've always been passionate about X. So yeah, don't be afraid to get creative. Make sure you make it bespoke. Again, it can be easy. The internet is full of templates. It can be so easy to just go and find one and use it. But if you are going to use a template, I would recommend writing your own, because that's when you're going to be able to let your own tone and writing style shine through. And like we said, that's how you're going to make your imprint and really make a good first impression. But also be aware, if you do write a template, I mean, I think we all wish that we could just use this, write an amazing cover letter and use it for all the different types of jobs. But unfortunately, you can't do that. So all the jobs are different. So always be prepared to kind of bespoke up whatever a template, if that's what you are doing, to make sure that you're really staying relevant to that specific job and that specific company. And as I've mentioned, tone and writing style. You don't have to copy the tone and writing style of the organisation you're applying to. Just don't be afraid to be yourself. And just to finish, so finish strong. So when you're signing off your cover letter, again, try to stay away from generic sayings or sign-offs. So you might just want to reinforce why exactly you want to apply for that job and that specific company. Keep it personalised like you have done for the rest of the cover letter. Don't waste all your good hard work, and always focus on your strengths and your weaknesses. So I know from experience, when you don't have perhaps all the right qualifications for a job, don't let that put you off applying. You can just you can focus on what skills you do have instead of bringing up in your cover letter those that you don't have. I hope everyone found that helpful.
Thank you very much. Alice, and thank you for including Lionel. I believe he definitely has a cross-generational appeal, shall we say, and you didn't just have me in mind. Thank you very much. Now, Noni, let's go over to you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you to everyone attending fourth day of summer school. Hopefully it's been as engaging and informative as you expected it to be. So just tying into what my colleague Stuart and Alice have already mentioned, it's all about personal statements, cover letters, just enhancing what you would typically or what you'd ordinarily have in a CV. And I know, you know, the task of building a CV or even having a CV is a daunting one for many. I've been there. I remember coming out of uni and not knowing what would be, you know, what a CV should look like, what would be expected of me, where do I begin? And I didn't know what skills or what experience I had to add to my CV, because frankly, I thought the experience that I had at that point wasn't really relevant to the corporate world that I was trying to get into. But what I've learned and what I continue to learn, so you can never be over-experienced when it comes to developing and working on your CV. It's a constant thing. You're always going to need a CV, because the reality is, you know, things change, the market changes. We will all realize from what's happened with this pandemic is that, you know, life can happen and we can always be in a situation where we need to start looking for our next step or next opportunity in order to grow and build our careers. So CV, your entry into the job market. So as I said, regardless of what experience or what skills you think you have or don't have, this is something that you're always going to need throughout your career. And I know, again, just reiterating, it really is daunting when you're starting to look for the first job. So what do you need a CV for? Where do you even begin with the CV? How am I supposed to write a CV when I don't have anything to write about? This is not true. We all have something to write about. We all have something to speak about when it comes to experience. You know, you don't have to have had a specific job. You don't have to have, had specific experience. However, as we go through school and we go through different, things outside of school, our different extracurricular activities, we all learn something and develop something. So think back, always reflect, and add these things to your CV. So don't let your lack of work experience be the barrier to your job search. Think about your skills, think about your brand, as Rebecca mentioned yesterday and as Alice mentioned today. Your brand is what will set you apart from everyone else, and this is where you begin in starting your CV. And always remember, the candidate with the most experience isn't always going to be the candidate who gets the job. The candidate with the most qualifications won't be the candidate who gets the job. What sets us apart is our skill and the softer skills. Sometimes hard skills are important, but our soft skills, our our personality, our brand, how are you presenting yourselves to the market, and what are you, what are you saying about yourself in order to make employers believe and have faith that if I bring this person on, they've got potential to become as big as they want to be. So your future is in your hands, and again, this is reflective in your CV. So again, just to repeat, employers are looking for more than just experience. So let your CV showcase who you are and why you're a great fit for the role and organisation. Just touching on the discussion we had yesterday around internships, one of the questions that I saw was how can I stand out and be considered for the internship program when so many other people have got so many qualifications. Again, drawing upon what my colleagues have already discussed, and again with your CV, that cover letter will set you apart, and what you provide in that cover letter will set you apart. I've seen Alice going through those 700 plus applications, and she's literally reading all those cover letters. She's reading all those answers people provide, and she's looking at the CV. So use that to sell yourself. Your CV is essentially, I can't emphasize how important it is, but it is your brand. This is your marketing material. This is your selling point. This is what essentially will win your interviews, in addition to the cover letter and how you presented that. So this is your time to shine, and your CV will allow you to do so. Again, experience doesn't mean no experience. Treat your extracurricular activities like jobs, because employers are willing to take voluntary experience into account when considering a candidate. So even it doesn't have to be a long-term, voluntary job that you did. It could be, do you offer tutorials? Do you tutor anyone, in less junior classes than you? Do you tutor anyone, your friends? Or do you go to the library? Do you do study groups? What skills are you picking up in those situations? It's those communication skills. It's that working collaboratively. You and your classmates, you and your different groups are working together to achieve the same goal, which is, getting good grades and presenting that, presenting what a presentation that you need to do. You're working together to deliver that. Those are skills that we often take for granted. However, those are the things that will build us and set us apart when we are putting this onto paper and sending it to an employer to see. Spend time thinking about the times when you volunteered at a company, conducted charity work, completed mandatory work experience in school. So I know a lot of people in the UK do some placements or work experience at some point in their secondary schooling. Again, it's not fixed on this. If you've worked, again, as Alice said, in a supermarket, if you've, helped in a family business, if you have some, a role in your church where maybe you look after finances, collecting the money after collections, those are skills that are going to enable you to enter the job market and stand out in the job market. It's up to you to use those skills to make you a better person and basically a better potential when it comes to your candidacy. We've all gained experience outside of work, so demonstrate these in your CVs. It could be, looking after your siblings. What are you learning from that? That's responsibility. It's building us in terms of our leadership, our management skills. We take it for granted, but those, minimal tasks like staying with siblings, looking after them day to day, those build us and build our characters, and our, will contribute towards our careers. So what information should your CV showcase? Make sure your CV is tailored to the job you're applying for. So know the job that you're applying, know the title. If you're applying for a research role, make sure that's reflected in your CV. What type of research have you done? Be it in school, be it, university, through, internships you've done. Reflect that. If you have no CV, if you have a CV with no work experience, then the key focus again is your skills. Know the job posting and put all the relevant skills that you think are required. This could include things like, again, attention to detail, customer service experience, or good time management. Always remember that, employers will also always look out for potential. Based on what skills you have, they can say, do you know what, these are the skills that we need. We can work on everything else that we need for this role, but the skills do stand out, and we've seen it in the cover letter. They've showed it, they've showcased it. Therefore, let's give them a chance on the basis that we see the potential in their CV and what they've presented. So incorporate the skills you see in the job posting on your CV. You can include them in the personal statement, as Stuart mentioned, or you could create them in a dedicated skills column on your CV. So just showcase the skills relevant to whatever job you're applying for. Don't forget to show your personality. This is so important. Show that personality and your enthusiasm for a role in your CV. You may not have the specific experience required, but if you create a CV that stands out and shows your personality, you might just get that phone call that you're waiting for, inviting you for an interview. We're not just looking at the right work experience, we're also looking for the right personality fit. We're looking for that person who will fit into, what we already have in the team. Or it could be someone who will bring a new dynamic into the team. So showcase that personality, be who you are, and present your best self whenever you apply for a role and when you attend interviews. And think about, think outside work history, look at the potential skills, the experience and personal traits that may be desirable to an employer. This is very brief, but in terms of, formatting your CV, keep it simple. One page is enough if you have provided all the relevant experience and skills that employer is looking for. Simple color schemes, we don't need a rainbow looking CV, just, nice and clean, either black or blue font, but just make sure it's eligible, make sure it's concise. You don't need photos or images. I've had the opportunity of working in South Africa and here, and so far photos have never been a requirement for a CV. You know, also make sure you clearly divide your sections, so break down what, you know, your professional. So professional profile could be just a little blurb, again, taking away from your personal statement or your cover letter, just something about you in that profile section about why you are right for this role. So it's, again, so bringing in that personality, bringing in those skills, and just summarizing them in that little bit of your CV. Having a section with your core skills. These are the things that we're looking for when we're going through the CVs. And your career summary, again, you can fit that in one page. Again, we just need company name, company date, what experience and what the role involved day to day. Again, it should be nice and concise, just giving us an idea of what experience you gained. Break the text so that at least, you know, your CV is more legible. So, you know, paragraphs in between the different sections that you have. Again, one page is what I recommend. If you have so much experience that you think is relevant for a role, let's go to 2 pages, but that should be the very maximum. Yeah, just make sure, again, little things, make sure we've got your name, make sure we've got your email address or telephone number, because those are things that people will, you know, tend to forget when they're in a rush. So just make sure you pay attention to those things when updating your CV and sending it over. And that's it for me.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Noni. I'm conscientious of the time, so let's jump straight into questions. Stuart, what do you think shouldn't be included in the personal statement? I mean, how long does it should be? Do you have any tips on that?
So I know in the UK, personal statements have a specific length. I think it's 4,000 characters, if memory serves. It's a long time since I did mine. So I can't necessarily answer for, you know, globally, but UK, it's 4,000 characters. Things you shouldn't include, I mean, keep your language clean, obviously. You should be doing that all the time when dealing in the professional environment. I think the key thing, though, is to not go into too much detail. The key thing you want to do is build interest in you and your experience and your knowledge. It's not necessarily, this is me and this is everything about me. This is me. This is a few areas that I'm particularly passionate about, interested in, good at, whatever it might be. And then, you know, don't go into a massive amount of detail on those areas. You want to keep that level so that the person who's reading it might go, I'd like to ask them some questions about that, rather than, okay, I know everything about that. I don't really need to know anything more.
Yes. Would you skip the conclusion if you have a good opening?
I think it's not necessarily worth skipping. I don't think a conclusion has to be longer than 1 sentence, and a sentence could be 5-6 words. It really doesn't have to be particularly long, but I think it's always worth just wrapping everything up as best you can. If it doesn't necessarily fit with your structure, you could leave it out. That's not a problem, but it all comes down to personal preference.
Okay. And for Alice, would you attach a CV to a cover letter? And, you know, how would you sort of, you know, write a cover letter that would sort of stand out?
Sorry, what was that? Would you
attach your CV to the cover letter?
So the idea is that a CV is a list of all of your education and work experience. Keep it to 2 pages, and then the cover letter is an actual letter in writing as to why you're applying for that specific role in a specific organisation. And it's meant to be an extension of your CV. It's bringing your experience to life. So what you don't want to do is just resubmit your whole cover letter in, your own CV in a cover letter style. What you want to do is be picking out the most relevant parts of your experience from your CV and bringing that to life. You know, why did that bring meaning to you? What's your passion? Why do you want to apply for this role? In this organisation in particular.
And Noni, should you delete skills gained from personal life when you gain more sort of hard skills and formal work experience?
I would say this would depend on what those skills are. So if those skills are relevant to the role or relevant in the career path that you are working towards, include that. The only thing that I would tailor, obviously, is as you get more experience, as you go up the job ladder, is obviously those jobs that you initially started off will start trailing off the CV. However, the skills are still important. So know the job that you're applying for and include the skills that you think are required and specific to that role.
Excellent. I think we have, we're out of time, but maybe if I can ask you to answer those questions in the Q&A box while we are doing the survey, and stay with us for a couple of more minutes. Thank you very much for everyone to join us today. Yet another exciting day. So many tips to take away, so many good suggestions here from how to write your CVs and personal statements and cover letters. So thank you to my team, and thank you to Cherry and Joyce. And thank you for all your contributions for the Middle East session tomorrow. We will send them your results and all your questions so they can prepare for the last day of the summer school.